Alexandra Winters never expected to go on a blind date at 38 years old. As the CEO of Winters Tech Solutions, a company she had built from the ground up into a $500 million enterprise, she rarely had time for romance. Her days were filled with board meetings, strategy sessions, and investor calls. Her nights were spent reviewing reports or attending business dinners. It wasn't that she didn't want love in her life, it was just that finding it seemed impossible with her schedule. "You need to get out more, Tina," her assistant of 5 years told her one Tuesday morning as she placed a steaming cup of coffee on Alexandra's glass desk. "All you do is work." Alexandra looked up from her laptop and raised an eyebrow. "That's what pays your salary, isn't it?" Tina wasn't intimidated. After half a decade of working together, she knew when to push her boss. "My brother's friend is single too. He's nice, hardworking, has his own business. Let me set you up." "Absolutely not," Alexandra said, returning to her email. "I don't have time for random dates with strangers." But Tina was persistent, bringing it up day after day until Alexandra finally agreed, if only to make her stop asking. "Fine, one dinner. But if he's boring or weird, I'm holding you personally responsible." Tina beamed. "You'll like him. His name is Ray Martinez." On the evening of the date, Alexandra stood in her walk-in closet, staring at rows of designer clothes. She'd canceled twice already, citing work emergencies, but Tina had rescheduled both times with a determination that bordered on annoying. Alexandra finally settled on a simple black dress, elegant but not trying too hard. Her penthouse apartment overlooked the city, lights twinkling below as the sun set. She poured herself a glass of wine and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone in hand. She'd done some digging earlier that day, looking up this Ray Martinez online. What she found made her instantly regret agreeing to the date. He ran some sort of community center in a less affluent part of town. His social media showed pictures of children's art projects and neighborhood cleanup events. There was nothing wrong with that, of course. It was admirable work. But it wasn't exactly the power match she had in mind. Alexandra picked up her phone and opened her group chat with her two closest friends from business. "School? You won't believe who I'm being set up with tonight," she typed. "A guy who runs a community center. Tina says he's a businessman." "Right." Her friend Vivian replied immediately. "Pics?" Alexandra sent the link to Ray's professional profile. "He's cute, though," responded Kathy, her other friend. "Maybe for someone else," Alexandra wrote back. "He's a single dad, too. Probably looking for a mother for his kid and financial stability. Not happening. At least get a free dinner out of it," Vivian suggested. "At a place that probably serves chicken fingers as an entree," Alexandra replied with a laughing emoji. "Wish me luck. I'll need it." She took another sip of wine, scrolling through emails on her phone. Her company was in talks to acquire a smaller tech firm, and the negotiations were at a critical stage. That's where her mind was, not on this blind date with a man who couldn't possibly understand her world. As she stepped into the elevator of her luxury building, Alexandra checked her reflection in the mirrored wall. Perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. The doorman nodded respectfully as she passed through the lobby. "Shall I call your car, Ms. Winters?" he asked. "Yes, thank you, Paul," she replied, slipping her phone into her designer purse. "I won't be long. I have an early meeting tomorrow." She was already planning her exit strategy, deciding she'd stay for one drink and then make an excuse about work. As the Blacktown car pulled up to the curb, Alexandra took a deep breath. Just get through this evening, she thought. A small price to pay to get Tina off her back. The restaurant Tina had chosen was upscale enough. Alexandra had to give her that. As she stepped out of the car, she glanced at her watch. She was already 15 minutes late, but that was intentional. In her experience, it was better to make an entrance than to be kept waiting. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she entered the restaurant. The maitre d' recognized her immediately. "Ms. Winters, welcome. Your party is already seated." He led her through the dimly lit dining room to a table near the back. A man stood up as she approached, Ray Martinez in person. He was tall, with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile. He wore a simple but well-fitted suit, nothing flashy but respectable. "Alexandra, I'm Ray. It's nice to meet you." He extended his hand. She took it briefly. "Sorry I'm late. Work crisis." The lie came easily. As Ray held out her chair, Alexandra caught the eye of a tech industry colleague at a nearby table. The woman gave her a curious look, no doubt wondering what Alexandra Winters was doing with someone so ordinary. Alexandra felt a twinge of embarrassment as she sat down. This was going to be a very long evening, and she already knew how it would end. What she didn't know was that this man, the one she had so quickly judged and dismissed, would save her life the very next day. As the waiter approached with menus, Alexandra discreetly checked her phone under the table, sending one last message to her friends. "SOS, send a rescue call in 45 minutes." She put on her most polite smile and prepared to endure what she was certain would be an utterly forgettable date with a man who existed in a completely different world than hers. Little did she know that their worlds were about to collide in ways she could never have imagined, and that the single dad she looked down upon would soon become the most important person in her life. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of expensive silverware against fine china plates. Alexandra settled into her chair, eyeing the man across from her. Ray Martinez looked comfortable in the upscale setting, but not in the way she was used to seeing with her usual business associates. There was no show of checking the wine list for the most expensive bottle or name-dropping connections. He simply thanked the waiter who filled his water glass and gave Alexandra his full attention. "So," he began, "Tina's told me a lot about you. She's very proud to work for you." Alexandra felt her phone vibrate in her purse. She reached for it immediately. "Sorry, I need to check this. It might be important." Ray nodded, patient as she scrolled through an email that could easily have waited until morning. She was already building her wall brick by brick. "Everything okay?" he asked when she finally set the phone down. "Fine," she replied, not elaborating. "So you run some kind of community center?" Ray's face brightened. "Yes, the Riverside Community Center. We serve about 200 families in the area with after-school programs, job training, and senior services." Alexandra nodded politely while scanning the restaurant for familiar faces. She spotted the owner of a rival tech company at the bar and frowned slightly. The last thing she needed was rumors about her dating life circulating in the industry. "And how did you get into that line of work?" she asked, barely listening for the answer. "Actually, I started out in corporate finance," Ray said, surprising her enough that she looked back at him. "I worked for Henderson Global for almost 10 years. Alexandra knew the firm. It was respected in financial circles. "That's quite a change," she said, now slightly more interested. "What made you leave?" Ray took a sip of water before answering. "My wife passed away when our daughter was 5. She had always been involved in community work, and after she died, I realized I wanted Lily to grow up seeing me do something meaningful, something that helped others." The sincerity in his voice made Alexandra uncomfortable. Death, tragedy, emotion. These weren't topics she discussed over dinner, especially not on first dates. She shifted in her seat. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said stiffly, the practiced response of someone who didn't know how to handle real pain. The waiter arrived to take their orders, providing a welcome interruption. Alexandra chose the most expensive item on the menu out of habit, while Ray selected a simple pasta dish. "So tell me about your daughter," Alexandra said after the waiter left, figuring it was a safe topic. Most parents loved talking about their children, which meant she could zone out while appearing interested. "Lily's 8 now," Ray said, his whole face softening. "She's smart, creative, stubborn as anything. She wants to be a scientist and an artist at the same time." "Ambitious," Alexandra commented, reaching for her phone again as it lit up with another notification. "Sorry," Ray said. "Am I keeping you from something important?" There was no judgment in his voice, just genuine concern, which somehow made Alexandra feel worse. She put the phone down. "No, it's fine. Just some deal negotiations. Nothing that can't wait." "Must be exciting running such a large company," Ray offered. "Tina mentioned you started it yourself?" "Yes, 8 years ago," Alexandra replied, warming slightly to a topic she was passionate about. "We develop security software for financial institutions. We just hit the $500 million valuation mark last quarter." "That's impressive," Ray said, and she could tell he meant it. "It takes a special kind of vision to build something like that." Alexandra allowed herself a small smile. "It wasn't easy. I had to fight my way into a lot of rooms full of men who didn't think I belonged there." "I can imagine," Ray nodded. "My wife faced similar challenges in her field. She was a civil engineer." And just like that, they were back to his dead wife. Alexandra took a large sip of her wine. "The center where you work," she said, deliberately changing the subject. "Is it a non-profit?" "It is," Ray confirmed. "I'm the executive director, but I also teach some of the classes. Financial literacy for teens, mainly." "So it's charity work?" she asked, unable to keep a slightly condescending tone from her voice. Ray looked at her evenly. It's meaningful work. We help people build better lives. The waiter arrived with their food and Alexandra was grateful for the distraction. She cut into her steak, considering how to steer the conversation to safer ground. Do you come here often? Ray asked, gesturing around the restaurant. Yes, for business dinners mostly, she replied. The owner is a client. It's nice, Ray said. Though I usually prefer places where you can actually see what's on your plate without a flashlight. It was meant as a joke, and despite herself, Alexandra felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. But then her phone lit up again, and this time she saw it was a text from Vivian, the rescue call they had arranged. I'm so sorry, Alexandra said, her voice shifting to a practiced tone of regret. There's an emergency at the office. I'm going to have to cut this short. Ray looked concerned. Is everything okay? Just a server issue with one of our biggest clients. She lied smoothly, gathering her purse. I need to oversee the fix personally. Of course, Ray said, standing as she rose from her chair. I understand. Alexandra pulled out her credit card, but Ray shook his head. I've got this, he said. You go handle your emergency. She hesitated, feeling a twinge of guilt about leaving him with the bill after she'd ordered the most expensive items. But the guilt wasn't enough to make her stay. Thank you, she said. It was nice meeting you. Likewise, Ray replied with a warm smile that she didn't deserve. I hope you resolve your issue quickly. As Alexandra walked briskly through the restaurant, she was already texting her friends. Freedom. Leaving now? Nice enough guy, but boring. Total do-gooder type. Outside, the night air was cool on her face. Her driver was already waiting, alerted by her earlier text. Home, Ms. Winters? He asked as she slid into the back seat. Yes, thanks, David, she replied, kicking off her heels and leaning back against the leather seat. The car pulled away from the curb, and Alexandra exhaled deeply. Another awkward setup survived. She'd tell Tina tomorrow that while Ray seemed nice, there just wasn't any chemistry. That would be the end of it. As they drove through the city streets, Alexandra's mind was already back on work. The acquisition deal, the quarterly reports due next week, the board meeting on Friday. She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, her carefully constructed world would come crashing down around her, and the man she had just dismissed so casually would be the only one who could save her. Morning sunshine streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexandra's corner office. The city sprawled beneath her, people and cars moving like toys from her 42nd floor vantage point. She'd arrived early, determined to put last night's disappointing date behind her and focus on what really mattered, closing the Henderson acquisition. I brought you the reports for this morning's meeting, Tina said, placing a folder on Alexandra's desk. Her expression was hopeful. So how did it go last night? Alexandra glanced up from her computer screen. It was fine. He seems nice, but... Tina pressed, but nothing. He's just not for me. Alexandra reached for the folder. We're too different. Tina looked disappointed, but not surprised. You didn't even give him a chance, did you? I showed up, didn't I? Alexandra replied, flipping through the report pages. Look, I appreciate the thought, but I don't need you playing matchmaker. I'm perfectly happy with my life as it is. Happy? When was the last time you took a vacation, or even left the office before 8? Tina challenged, her familiarity with her boss allowing her to speak freely. Alexandra sighed. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Can we please focus on work? Tina relented, reviewing the day's schedule before heading back to her desk. Alexandra rubbed her temples, already feeling a headache coming on. The meeting with the board would be tense. Not everyone agreed with her strategy for the acquisition. She reached for the takeout coffee on her desk. The cafe downstairs had changed suppliers recently, and the new blend was stronger, which she appreciated given her late-night reviewing contracts. She took a large sip, grimacing slightly at the bitter taste, and continued preparing her notes. 10 minutes later, as she was rehearsing her presentation, Alexandra felt an odd tingling sensation on her lips. She touched them absently, then noticed her fingers looked strangely swollen. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gripped the edge of her desk. Tina, she called, her voice sounding distant even to her own ears. Can you come in here? By the time Tina appeared in the doorway, Alexandra was struggling to breathe. Her tongue felt too big for her mouth, and her throat was tightening alarmingly fast. Alexandra! Tina rushed to her side. What's wrong? Alexandra tried to speak but could only make a wheezing sound. Her vision was blurring around the edges. Panic surged through her as she recognized what was happening. An allergic reaction. She fumbled in her purse for the epinephrine pen she always carried, but her swelling fingers couldn't grasp it. Help, she managed to gasp. Oh my God. Tina shouted toward the open door. Someone call 911. Miss Winters needs help. Staff members appeared in the doorway, faces showing shock and confusion. Alexandra heard Tina barking orders as if from underwater. She's having an allergic reaction. Does anyone know where her EpiPen is? Check her purse. Alexandra tried again to tell them, but no words came out. The room was spinning now, dark spots dancing in her vision. She was vaguely aware of someone dumping the contents of her purse onto the desk, hands frantically searching through her belongings. I found it, someone called, holding up the EpiPen. But I've never used one of these before. Me neither, Tina admitted, her voice shaking. I don't want to do it wrong. Alexandra felt herself sliding sideways in her chair. She couldn't breathe. This can't be happening, she thought desperately. The ambulance is stuck in traffic, another voice reported. They say at least 15 minutes. 15 minutes was too long. Alexandra knew she didn't have that much time. Tina was on her phone again, speaking rapidly. Yes, it's an emergency. She can't breathe. We found her EpiPen, but no one knows how to use it properly. Through the fog closing in around her, Alexandra heard Tina's next words clearly. Ray, it's Tina, Alexandra's assistant. I know this is weird, but you're near our office, right? At the community center? Alexandra's having a severe allergic reaction and we need help right away. Ray? Alexandra's mind struggled to make sense of this. The man from last night? Why would Tina call him? Time seemed to stretch and compress. Alexandra was on the floor now, though she didn't remember falling. Faces hovered above her, voices echoed around her, but she couldn't focus on any of it. Her chest burned with the effort to draw breath. Then suddenly there were new footsteps, rapid and purposeful. A familiar face appeared above her, Ray Martinez, looking nothing like the politely rejected date from the night before. His expression was focused, calm in the midst of chaos. I'm here, he said to no one in particular. Let me through. The crowd parted. Ray knelt beside her, his warm hands gently turning her to a better position. Alexandra, he said clearly, looking directly into her eyes, I'm going to help you. You're having an anaphylactic reaction. I'm going to use your EpiPen, okay? She couldn't respond, but he didn't wait for an answer. With practiced movements, he took the EpiPen from Tina's shaking hands, removed the safety cap, and positioned it correctly against Alexandra's outer thigh. This will hurt for a second, he warned, then firmly pressed the auto-injector into her leg. Alexandra felt the needle pierce through her skirt into her thigh, followed by a burning sensation as the epinephrine was released into her muscle. Ray held it in place for a full 10 seconds, exactly as the instructions recommended, but which most people forgot to do. Now we wait, he said, still holding her hand. Keep breathing, Alexandra. Help is coming. The effect wasn't immediate, but gradually Alexandra felt her airways begin to open. The crushing weight on her chest eased slightly, allowing her to take shallow breaths. The room stopped spinning quite so violently. Ray stayed beside her, monitoring her pulse with 2 fingers on her wrist, his other hand still holding hers. You're doing great, he assured her. The ambulance will be here soon. Just keep breathing. Alexandra's mind was clearing enough to register confusion. How did he know what to do? Why was he so calm when everyone else had panicked? The emergency team just arrived in the lobby, someone announced. They're on their way up. Good. Ray nodded. Tell them it's anaphylaxis. Patient administered epinephrine approximately 3 minutes ago, showing signs of improvement but still in distress. The clinical precision of his instructions surprised everyone in the room. This wasn't just a good Samaritan who happened to know basic first aid. Ray Martinez clearly had experience with medical emergencies. When the paramedics arrived, Ray briefed them efficiently, stepping back to let them take over but staying within Alexandra's sight. She kept her eyes fixed on him as oxygen was placed over her face and IVs were started. He was a point of stability in the chaos, his calm presence somehow reassuring. As they loaded Alexandra onto a stretcher, she managed to reach out a hand toward him. Ray stepped forward immediately, taking it. Thank you, she whispered through the oxygen mask. Don't try to talk, he said gently. Just focus on breathing. I'll meet you at the hospital. Alexandra wanted to tell him he didn't need to do that. They barely knew each other, and she'd been terrible to him, but she didn't have the strength. All she could do was nod weakly as the paramedics wheeled her toward the elevator. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Ray speaking quietly to Tina, who was wiping tears from her eyes. In the space of 20 minutes, her entire perception of this man had been upended. The boring do-gooder she had dismissed so easily the night before had just saved her life with a competence and composure that none of her high-powered colleagues had been able to muster. As the elevator descended, Alexandra realized with startling clarity that she knew nothing about Ray Martinez, nothing that actually mattered anyway. And suddenly she wanted to learn everything. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors and the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes in the hallway outside. Alexandra lay propped up against white pillows, an IV line trailing from her arm to a bag of fluids hanging beside the bed. The worst of the crisis had passed, but the doctors wanted to keep her for observation to ensure the reaction didn't return. She felt exhausted in a way she never had before, not the familiar tiredness after a long workday or difficult negotiation, but a bone-deep weariness that came from having her body turn against itself. Her throat still felt raw, her voice raspy when she spoke. A light knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting a nurse for another vitals check. Instead, Ray Martinez stepped into the room, hesitating at the threshold. "Is this a good time? I can come back later if you're resting." Alexandra felt strangely self-conscious in her hospital gown, without makeup, her hair a mess. She resisted the urge to touch it. "No, please," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her bed. "Come in." Ray approached carrying a small potted plant rather than the typical cut flowers. "Peace lily," he explained, placing it on the bedside table. "They're good for purifying the air, and they're pretty hard to kill, even for people who travel a lot." The thoughtfulness of the gift, practical, long-lasting, chosen with her lifestyle in mind, caught Alexandra off guard. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. "And not just for the plant." Ray sat down, his expression serious. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she replied. "Still shaky, but the doctors say I'm going to be fine." She paused, then added, "Thanks to you." He waved away her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. "But they didn't," Alexandra said firmly. Everyone else panicked. "You didn't. Why?" Ray looked down at his hands for a moment before meeting her eyes again. "I've been through it before. Not exactly the same situation, but similar enough." Something in his voice made Alexandra pay close attention. There was old pain there, carefully contained but still present. "My wife," he continued quietly. "She had a severe allergy to bee stings. We didn't know until—" He trailed off, then took a deep breath. "We were at a park with Lily. She was just 2 then. A bee stung Jenny on the back of her neck. Within minutes, she was struggling to breathe." Alexandra felt her chest tighten as she realized where the story was heading. "We didn't have an EpiPen," Ray said. "We didn't even know she was allergic. By the time the ambulance arrived," he shook his head, "it was too late." "I'm so sorry," Alexandra whispered, the words feeling completely inadequate. Ray nodded in acknowledgement. "After that, I learned everything I could about anaphylaxis. Got certified in first aid. Made sure everyone at the community center was trained too. We run free classes now for parents and teachers." A small, sad smile crossed his face. Jenny would have liked that. Alexandra felt ashamed of how she'd judged him, how she'd mocked his work to her friends. What she'd dismissed as charity work was deeply personal to him, born from terrible loss. "That's why Tina called you?" she asked. "She knew you had medical training?" "Your office is only 2 blocks from the center," Ray explained. "Tina called anyone nearby who might be able to help. I happen to be the closest." Another nurse appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Patel would like to speak with you, Ms. Winters." "Of course," Alexandra said. The doctor who entered was a middle-aged woman with a kind face and efficient manner. She checked Alexandra's vitals, reviewed the chart, and asked a few questions about how she was feeling. "Your recovery is progressing well," she concluded. "We'd like to keep you overnight just as a precaution, but you should be able to go home tomorrow morning." "Thank you." "Doctor," Alexandra said. As Dr. Patel turned to leave, she noticed Ray. "Mr. Martinez, I didn't see you there." "How are you?" I'm well, thank you, Dr. Patel, Ray replied with a warm smile. The doctor turned to Alexandra. You're in good hands with this one around. His first aid classes at the community center have probably saved more lives than my ER shifts some days. After she left, Alexandra looked at Ray with new curiosity. You know my doctor? We work together sometimes, he explained. Dr. Patel volunteers at the center once a month offering free health screenings. A lot of our families don't have regular access to health care. Before Alexandra could respond, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. Ray handed it to her and she saw Tina's name on the screen. It's my assistant, she said, suddenly remembering the chaos she'd left behind at the office. I should take this, Ray stood up. I'll give you some privacy. No, please stay, Alexandra said, surprising herself as much as him. This won't take long. She answered the call, putting it on speaker. Tina, I'm fine. Don't need to worry. Thank goodness, Tina's relieved voice came through. The whole office is freaking out. The board wants to reschedule the meeting for next week, but Henderson's team is pushing back. They want to know if you can do a video call tomorrow. From the hospital? Alexandra asked, incredulous. They're worried about delays affecting the stock price, Tina explained apologetically. Alexandra felt a flash of anger. She'd nearly died hours ago and all they cared about was the stock price. Tell them I'll be back in the office the day after tomorrow, she said firmly. The meeting can wait until then. There was a surprised pause from Tina. Alexandra never postponed important meetings, not even when she'd had the flu last winter and could barely stand. Okay, Tina said slowly. I'll let them know. Do you need anything from the apartment? I can bring it to the hospital. No, I'm fine. Thank you, Tina. Alexandra hesitated, then added, and thank you for calling Ray. You made the right decision. After hanging up, Alexandra noticed Ray watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. Nothing, he said. I just didn't expect you to push back on your meeting. You seemed very dedicated to your work last night. There was no judgment in his voice, just observation, but Alexandra felt defensive anyway. I am dedicated, she said, but nearly dying gives you a certain perspective. Ray nodded. Life has a way of reminding us what matters. They fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. Can I ask you something? Alexandra finally said. How do you do it? How do you go on after losing someone like that? The question had escaped before she could consider whether it was too personal, too soon. But Ray didn't seem offended. You just do, he said simply. At first you go on because you have to. For me it was Lily, she needed me. And then gradually, day by day, you build a new life. Different from what you planned, but still worth living. As he spoke, a nurse popped her head in. Mr. Martinez? There's a call for you at the nurse's station. Something about your daughter? Excuse me, Ray said to Alexandra, rising quickly. Lily's with a neighbor. I should check on her. Of course, Alexandra replied, watching him hurry out. Left alone, she gazed around the sterile hospital room, seeing it with new eyes. For years, she had measured success in dollars and acquisitions, in corner offices and magazine covers. None of that had mattered when she couldn't breathe, when her life was slipping away, and the man she had so casually dismissed, the one whose values seemed so foreign to her own, had shown up when it counted most. Not because he wanted anything from her, not because of who she was or what she owned, but simply because another human being needed help. Alexandra leaned back against her pillows, a strange feeling washing over her. It took her a moment to identify it as humility, an emotion she hadn't experienced in a very long time. When Ray returned 15 minutes later, his expression was apologetic. I'm sorry, but I need to go. The neighbor watching Lily has a family emergency and I need to pick her up. Of course, Alexandra said. Go take care of your daughter. Ray hesitated by the door. Will you be okay? Is there someone who can stay with you tonight? Alexandra thought of her contacts list, full of business associates and acquaintances, but few people she would call in a crisis. I'll be fine. The nurses are checking regularly. He didn't look convinced, but nodded. I left my number with the nurse. Call if you need anything, okay? Anything at all. I will, she promised, though they both knew she probably wouldn't. As Ray turned to leave, Alexandra called after him. Ray, thank you. For everything. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. Get some rest, Alexandra. I'll check on you tomorrow. After he left, Alexandra picked up her phone, scrolling to the group chat with her friends. Their last exchange was still there. Her mocking messages about Ray before and during the date. She felt a wave of shame reading them now. She began typing a new message. Remember that boring date from last night? He saved my life today. Her thumb hovered over the send button, but something held her back. This wasn't gossip to be shared, even with friends. What had happened today, what she had learned about Ray. It felt too important, too private for a group chat. Instead, she set her phone aside and reached for the peace lily he had brought. Its white flowers seemed to glow in the dimming evening light of her hospital room. Hardy enough to survive neglect, beautiful without being showy. Practical yet meaningful, the plant reminded her of its giver. Alexandra touched one of the smooth green leaves, wondering how someone who had experienced such loss could remain so kind, so giving. And for the first time in years, she wondered if perhaps she had been measuring success by the wrong metrics all along. 1 week after her hospital stay, Alexandra stood outside the Riverside Community Center, feeling oddly nervous. The building was modest, a renovated storefront with large windows and a cheerful sign. Children's artwork decorated the glass, bright splashes of color against the gray city backdrop. She'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, eventually settling on dark jeans and a simple blouse, nothing like her usual power suits and designer dresses. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, her makeup minimal. She wanted to look approachable, not intimidating. It mattered to her suddenly what Ray and the people at his center would think. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The center was buzzing with activity. Seniors playing chess in one corner, teenagers working on computers along one wall, and a group of younger children painting at a cluster of tables. The space was clean but worn, everything well used and cared for. A woman at the front desk looked up with a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Ray Martinez," Alexandra said. "Is he available?" "He's teaching a class right now, but he should be finished in about 10 minutes. "You're welcome to wait." The woman gestured to a small seating area. "Are you here about one of our programs?" "No, I'm—" Alexandra hesitated, unsure how to define herself. "I'm a friend." The word felt strange on her tongue. Were they friends? She wasn't sure what they were, but it didn't feel right to say she was just someone whose life he had saved. As she waited, Alexandra observed the center with new eyes. What she might once have seen as shabby, she now recognized as resourceful. Every inch of space was being used effectively. Volunteers moved with purpose, treating everyone with dignity and respect. There was joy here and community, things her own expensive world often lacked. A door opened down the hall and a group of adults emerged, thanking Ray as they left. He spotted Alexandra and his eyes widened in surprise. He said something to an assistant, then made his way over to her. "Alexandra," he said warmly, "this is unexpected. How are you feeling?" "Much better," she replied, suddenly self-conscious. "The doctors gave me a clean bill of health yesterday." "That's great news," Ray said. "What brings you to the center?" Alexandra glanced around. "Could we talk somewhere private?" "Of course." Ray led her to a small office, closing the door behind them. It was a modest space, desk piled with paperwork, walls covered with children's drawings and thank you notes. "Have a seat," he offered, gesturing to a chair as he leaned against his desk. "Is everything okay?" Alexandra took a deep breath. "I came to apologize." Ray looked puzzled. "For what?" "For how I behaved on our date," she said. "I was rude and dismissive. I made assumptions about you and your work, without knowing anything about either. I was," she swallowed hard, "arrogant and unkind." Ray started to wave it off. "It's fine." "No, it's not," Alexandra interrupted. "And there's more." She pulled out her phone, opened the group chat, and handed it to him. "These are messages I sent to my friends before and during our date. A friend sent me screenshots this morning. She thought I should know what kind of person I've become." Ray read in silence, his expression unreadable. Alexandra watched him, stomach knotting with shame as he scrolled through her mocking words. Finally, he handed the phone back to her. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth," she said, meeting his eyes. "And because I need to own what I did if I'm ever going to change." Ray was quiet for a moment. "That must have been a hard conversation with your friend." "It was," Alexandra admitted. "But necessary." She cares enough to be honest with me. Another silence fell between them. Alexandra had rehearsed this moment, but now found herself unsure how to continue. I don't expect forgiveness, she finally said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm grateful, not just for saving my life, but for showing me what true strength looks like. Ray studied her face, as if searching for something. Thank you for your honesty, he said at last. That can't have been easy. It wasn't, she agreed. But nearly dying makes you rethink a few things. A hint of a smile appeared on Ray's face. I imagine it would. Alexandra glanced around the office at the artwork and photos that told the story of his work. I was also hoping I might be able to help in some way. With the center, I mean. I have resources that could be useful. Ray's expression turned cautious. We're not looking for charity, Alexandra. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. From what I've seen, you're doing incredible work here with limited resources. I have connections, experience with fundraising, expertise in financial planning. I'd like to volunteer. Actually volunteer, not just write a check. Ray looked surprised. You'd want to do that? Even with your schedule? I'm making some changes, Alexandra said, starting with my priorities. Before Ray could respond, a knock came at the door and a young girl stuck her head in. She had Ray's warm brown eyes and curious expression. Dad? Ms. Chen says the computer keeps freezing during the resume class. I'll be right there, Lily, Ray promised. Could you give me one more minute? The girl nodded, eyes lingering curiously on Alexandra before she closed the door. Your daughter? Alexandra asked, though the resemblance was obvious. Yes, that's Lily, Ray said with evident pride. She comes here after school. Alexandra smiled. She has your eyes, and her mother's spirit, Ray added. Always wanting to help everyone. He turned back to Alexandra, his expression thoughtful. If you're serious about volunteering, we could use someone with your skills. We're trying to expand our job training program, but the grant paperwork is overwhelming our staff. I'm serious, Alexandra confirmed. Whatever you need. Ray studied her for another moment, then nodded. How about we start with one project and see how it goes? No commitments on either side. That sounds fair, she agreed. Great. There's a volunteer orientation next Tuesday evening, if you're available. I'll be there, Alexandra promised. They stood up, and an awkward moment followed as neither seemed sure how to end the conversation. I should let you get back to the computer crisis, Alexandra finally said. Right. Ray nodded. I'll walk you out. As they moved through the center, Alexandra noticed people greeting Ray warmly, staff and visitors alike. He knew everyone by name, asked about family members, offered encouragement. This was a man who had built a community, something far more challenging than building a company. At the front door, Alexandra turned to him. Thank you for hearing me out today, and for giving me a chance to make amends. Everyone deserves a second chance, Ray said simply. Then, with a hint of humor, he added, even millionaire CEOs who mock their dates. Alexandra felt her face flush, but there was no malice in his teasing. If anything, it suggested forgiveness. I'll see you Tuesday? He asked. Tuesday, she confirmed with a smile. As Alexandra walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with an email from her assistant. The Henderson deal was waiting for her signature. Board members wanted to reschedule their postponed meeting. Investors were asking for her recovery timeline. A week ago, these would have seemed like the most important things in the world. Now, they could wait. 6 months later, Alexandra stood at the podium in the newly renovated Riverside Community Center, addressing the crowd gathered for the grand opening. When I first came here, she said, I thought I had all the answers. I measured success by profit margins and stock prices. I believed my worth as a person was tied to my net worth as a CEO. She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. Community members, volunteers, donors, and in the front row, Ray and Lily. Then I had the incredible good fortune to meet someone who showed me what really matters, she continued. Someone who taught me that true success isn't about what you have, but what you give. That strength isn't shown in boardrooms, but in how you face loss and keep your heart open anyway. Ray smiled up at her. The same warm smile that had become an essential part of her life over the past months. What had started as volunteer work had grown into friendship, and gradually, into something more. Alexandra still ran her company, but with new priorities and boundaries. She left the office by 6 most days, spent Saturdays at the center teaching business skills to aspiring entrepreneurs, and had dinner with Ray and Lily at least twice a week. Today, we're celebrating more than just a renovated building, Alexandra said. We're celebrating a community that welcomes everyone, even people who didn't know they needed a community until they found one. After her speech, as guests mingled and explored the new facilities, Ray found her near the refreshment table. "Nice speech," he said, handing her a cup of punch. "Though you left out the part where you nearly died and I heroically saved you." Alexandra laughed. "I thought that might sound a bit dramatic for a ribbon-cutting ceremony." "Probably right," he agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You know, when Tina first suggested setting us up, I almost said no." "Why?" Alexandra asked, surprised. "I Googled you," he admitted. "Saw all those magazine covers calling you the Ice Queen of Tech and thought you'd be impossible to talk to." "You weren't entirely wrong," Alexandra acknowledged with a rueful smile. Ray shook his head. "I was completely wrong. About what mattered anyway." Lily bounded up to them, excitement radiating from her small frame. "Dad, Miss Alexandra, come see the new art room. They put up my painting by the door." "We'll be right there," Ray promised. As Lily ran ahead, Ray took Alexandra's hand, his touch still sending a flutter through her chest after all these months. "I'm glad Tina's so stubborn," he said softly. "Me too," Alexandra replied, squeezing his hand. "Though next time I see her, I should probably thank her for ignoring all my instructions about screening my calls during the hospital stay." Ray raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "She told me later that she let all my calls go to voicemail except yours," Alexandra explained. "She was determined to give us another chance." "Smart woman," Ray said. "Almost as smart as the one who finally realized what was right in front of her," Alexandra replied, leaning in to kiss him lightly. From across the room, Lily called impatiently, "Come on! You're missing everything." Hand in hand, they walked toward her, toward the future neither of them had planned but both now embraced wholeheartedly. Alexandra thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, successful by all external measures but ultimately alone. How quickly life could change when you opened yourself to new possibilities, when you admitted you didn't have all the answers. Sometimes the wrong date turned out to be exactly the right person. Sometimes mockery turned into gratitude, and sometimes, Alexandra realized as she looked at Ray's profile, the person who saved your life ended up giving you a whole new one in the process.